Hi, thanks for joining me. Today I'll be going over managing Kubernetes service deployments with Terraform using the import workflow and refactoring the config into reusable modules. I have a small 4-node Kubernetes cluster set up running on my Raspberry Pi, and I have my machine set up to access the cluster. As you can see here in K9S, I have a small variety of services running. Each service is running its own namespace, and because it's in a cluster, I have multiple instances of each service running. These were originally deployed by hand to the Kubernetes cluster by using the Compose tool to convert Docker Compose files to YAML files that were then hand-applied with kubectl. I don't want to have to go through that much effort in the future, so let's get deployment under control. We'll start in a blank directory. So first we're going to get a gitignore set up to ignore the state files that Terraform creates, since these files should not be checked in. So first we need to tell Terraform that we're working with Kubernetes and how to talk to it. We'll make a main.tf file, which should allow us to Terraform init. And then we'll add that main.tf to Git. In order to import, Terraform needs template declarations to be able to know what resources we are interested in. For Kubernetes service deployments, there are 5 different resources we care about: namespace, deployment, ingress, service, and service account. So we're going to create a templates.tf file to hold those resource templates. We're only going to use this briefly, but we'll add it to Git so the history will show the full progression. Now that we have the file, we can import the data from the cluster into our TF state. I'm going to go a little bit slower for this first one, but we're going to be doing several of these imports later in the video, so I will make those go faster. But for this one, we're just going to do them one at a time. So that imported the namespace into the TF state. Here comes the deployment. We're going to be working with the devlog project initially. Here's the ingress and the service, and now the service account. Now that the information has been cached from the cluster to the TF state files, we can use the TF state to generate a TF file that has all the information in it. So we're going to use this Terraform show command and redirect the output to deployment.tf. Then we're going to get rid of the templates file, add the deployment TF, and do a git commit, just so we can show the progression. Starting from the bottom and working our way up, we're going to delete anything that Terraform is complaining about. If we try to do a Terraform plan right now, it's going to complain about a whole bunch of stuff. A bunch of errors, because it has a whole bunch of stuff in there that it can't actually deal with. So if we go into deployment.tf, my text editor actually has all these error messages integrated, which is really handy and makes it a lot easier. So we're going to start from the bottom and work our way up and just delete anything that it's complaining about. Let's see. Health check node port. Yeah, perfect. UID resource version, fine. Yep. And then status, we'll set it automatically so this whole block goes, and get rid of ID as well. Get rid of status. Expected host port to be a valid port number. Got 0. Host port. So we get rid of host port. Enable service links. No. Active deadline seconds. Active deadline seconds is up here, so we'll get rid of that line. Yep. Got rid of the error. Can't figure value for generation. So we'll get rid of generation. Perfect. UID and resource version. Get rid of generation and the ID. I think that'll be it. Perfect. So now I believe we can Terraform plan. And it has a couple of minor things which are just fine. I don't care about these. So I'm going to go ahead and Terraform apply. And now our TF state is going to be synced with our config. So now that we have that, we're going to commit that to Git so we can see the progression. Before splitting it into modules, though, we're going to want to delete more stuff. There is still a bunch of stuff in this deployment TF that is just extra. And now that we've removed all the errors from it, now we have a good opportunity to go through and delete anything in here that doesn't look like we need to be actively involved in specifying it. The provider has a lot of these values built in, and even if we don't mention them, it will be able to figure it out. So we should get this to a minimal state so that we only have to maintain code that we actually have to maintain and just inherit everything else from the provider. I'm going to show a couple of these, but I'm probably going to movie magic the rest of them and speed them up because nobody wants to sit here and watch me do this entire thing. Just to show what it looks like, I'm going to get rid of that annotation. I believe I actually need that annotation, but we can see now that I've deleted it with a Terraform plan, it shows extra stuff, so that was too much. So I'm going to undo that to put it back, look for stuff that is less likely to be needed to config. So I deleted some lines, but my Terraform plan still comes back fine, so those are fine to get rid of. Web service is probably us. I'll get rid of this whole strategy block. And it's best to check after each one in case you need to undo it. Annotations? I don't know if we need annotations. Nope, don't need annotations. Okay, so I bet we need that service account name, but I don't know if we need anything else. We need auto-mount service account token and enable service links. So automate service account token and enable service links. Check Terraform plan again. Looks good. Moving on. Args and command probably don't need. Web service is probably us because we have things named web service. And then I think those all look configured. So see what it says about that. Perfect. No, need the path. Do we need the path type? We do not. Okay, let's see. What are we likely going to need here in... I think we need selector. Perfect. I think we're going to need port, but let's check. Yeah, we did indeed. So put that back. Get rid of annotations and labels here. Perfect. So now, if we check get diff, we have removed a large number of lines from our deployment file, and Terraform plan still shows clean. This is really good for us because this is less code that we have to maintain. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and make a commit point in Git. And now let's split the Terraform files into multiple. Right now we just have one Terraform file, which is the deployment.tf. And let's see, how many lines is that? That is 136 lines. I'm kind of allergic to large files. So we're going to split that into multiple files so that we can move on and get going on creating our modules. So I've just made a bunch of copies of that file. And now we're just going to edit all the TF files and delete anything that doesn't exist, that should not exist in any given file. So this is actually deployment.tf. You can see in the upper left-hand corner. So we'll just delete everything else in the file. This is the ingress file, so we no longer need this deployment section. Get rid of that. Now we have the ingress, and we'll get rid of everything else in the file. This is the main.tf we started with, so we'll move on. So this is namespace. We'll get rid of the deployment and the ingress. Keep the namespace, get rid of the service and the service account. This is the service, so we don't need the deployment, the ingress, or the namespace. Left with the service, and then we'll get rid of the service account. And this is just the service account, so we're going to delete most of the file and just leave the service account. Okay, so now that we're here, we should be able to Terraform plan. And the configuration hasn't changed. So we just split it into multiple files, not a big deal. So now we're going to add everything to Git. So let's check status. Everything looks like we expect. And we will split deployment.tf into individual files. This is a nice first step, but that was a lot of work, and it's only one of the 14 sites we're running right now. Let's create a module out of it so we can reuse it in a simplified form against our other services and find out what configuration differences they have. Modules is a magical directory name in Terraform. We're going to need a readme.md file as well. Modules are expected to live in subdirectories of the modules directory. So we're going to make a modules directory with a mel deployment directory inside of it, because that's what we're going to call our module. Let's go ahead and make sure we have our README. And then we're going to move all of the TF files that we just edited into that directory. And then we will make a new deployment.tf file that references our new module. Let me slow down a little bit and do that in 2 pastes. Okay. So Terraform plan will actually fail on us right now because we need to do a Terraform init because we've introduced a new module, which is our modules mel deployment module. So let's do a Terraform init, which will go through and check all of our modules. Those look good, so let's see what Terraform plan says. 5 to change, 5 to destroy. So that's a problem. We haven't changed anything, just moved it around, yet Terraform wants to destroy and recreate everything. We can use the move functionality in Terraform to tell the state file what's going on. So let's create a move.tf file. And we'll move all 5 of our services into their new namespaces under module.devlog deployments. Okay, so as you can see, all these moved blocks just move the initial information that we imported, namespace, deployment, service, account service, and the ingress, and it just moves them to the new namespaces under our module with the devlog deployment name that we referenced in our deployment.tf. So let's look at Terraform plan. And it will say 0 to add, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. This is exactly what we want to see. So let's go ahead and Terraform apply. Yes, this will update the state. And let's go ahead and add everything. And we actually don't need the move.tf file anymore because our state knows that everything is moved over now. So we can get rid of move.tf, and if we Terraform apply, or Terraform plan, I guess, it will show everything is hunky-dory. So now we have one service in a module completely configured with, if we ignore the module itself, 3 lines of code. So we have 14 of those services, so let's start adding the other services, which is going to allow us to see what changes we're going to need to make between the different deployments. So the next service that we're going to start worrying about is called Abe, A-B-E. So we're just going to add another source in here, and we're going to see what Terraform plan says. It says we need to run init because we made changes to the modules, and now when we run Terraform plan, it says it's got 5 to add, 0 to destroy. So we can also import Abe's deployment information into our TF state now that it exists, the same way we did with the templates earlier. So we're just going to do that real quick. I'm just going to paste all 5 of these in here. We can look at the syntax of them. So these are just Terraform imports, but instead of deploying or importing directly into the Kubernetes provider, we're going to be importing them into our Abe deployment module that we just defined in the deployment.tf file. These do have sub references within them pointing to the Kubernetes namespace, deployment, ingress, service, and the service account, just like we did for the other one, but they're pointing to Abe instead of devlog because we care about that information. So let's go ahead and import those. And now let's see what Terraform apply says. So devlog and Abe have slight differences in their config, and Terraform is telling us about those right now. So, for instance, right here, we can see that the namespace changed from Abe to devlog. So it's going to try to, we definitely don't want to apply these. it would overwrite Abe's deployment information with devlog if we don't fix these. So to fix these, we need to make variables that we can put into our top-level deployment.tf so that we can override the values for the submodule. So let's go ahead and get going on that. So we can see we have namespace, we have name. We're just looking for things that say they force replacement. So name, namespace, namespace. Okay, really only seeing name and namespace right now. I'm sure somewhere there's a host name that's going to be different though. So let's just go ahead and add those three variables: namespace, name, and host. So we're going to create a variables.tf in the module. And these are just going to be string variables with no defaults. So we'll just put those in there real quick. And then we're going to need to edit our deployment.tf to actually have these variables. So let's add namespace and hostname to both of these. Okay, so Terraform thinks these are okay now, so let's see what Terraform plan says. Of course, I didn't integrate the variables into the actual module, so this says the same thing it did before. So let's go ahead and start editing the module files. So these are the files in the module directory. So we're going to just edit these. So this is our namespace. Image is going to be a problem because they have different Docker images. So we have name, we have namespace. We'll come back to image. So name and namespace. So we'll just do var.name, var.namespace. var.host. This is the namespace file, so this just needs name var.namespace. That's a little better. So it looks like the only thing we have different is our image. So let's add a variable for image. And on this one, we're going to put a default. Because most of the images are the same name as the actual projects that's being deployed. So we should only have to specify if it's something different from that. So in order to do that, we're going to need to modify the deployment images right here. So instead, we're going to do this neat little trick that checks to see if image is blank. If it is, use the default. If not, use the one that was specified. Looks a little bit like that. So if an image file has been defined, use that. Otherwise, use the default one. Let's see what Terraform plan says. Okay, so we didn't actually configure Abe to have a different image. So let's add that in. The nice thing about doing this is it's very much like the red-green refactor style, where Terraform has your back the entire time. It will show you the differences that it's going to make if you actually ran it right now. So it allows you to make changes and then see what it would do to what your config that you have imported. So these are the same changes that we saw when we first did our initial apply back when. I don't know why in particular these ones show up, but there's no changes here that are going to mess up anything, so we're just going to apply this. To change, 0 to destroy, 0 to add, and both of the changes we don't actually care about. So enter value yes, and now if we do Terraform plan, it will show up clean. So this is a great spot to make a commit. So and now we have 2 services that are being deployed on this one. So that's really exciting. And, okay, so let's move on. Let's do a third one. And let's see, I think this one's going to have an environment variable that's different. So let's get that going. This next one's going to be avatars. So let's get avatars in there. So now it exists in the config, which means that we can import it. We're going to be the same imports that we did last time, except we're going to be importing avatars instead of Abe. So we're just going to import all that stuff. Right, going to have to run Terraform init before we can do any of that, because we've added a new module, our avatars module. So now we're going to import those, and it'll work this time. Perfect. So if we did a Terraform plan, it will say that it doesn't have this environment variable, web port. It also says it doesn't have container port. So we're going to need to be able to configure container port and add environment variables in our config file. So let's go ahead and add those in the variables file. So container port is going to default to 80 because that's what everybody else uses. And then let me see what the environment one should look like. So environment variables we want to be able to specify as a string map. So we'll go ahead and put that in. And that will let us do friendly format, just like, environment variable equals value. Sadly, that's not how they work in the actual deployment.tf, so we're going to have to do a transformation to actually make that work. But we've now defaulted the web port to 80. And we will go see what we need to do. So look at Terraform plan. So the container port's still not set. Web port has changed from 8080 to 80. So we need to make sure that we configure avatars to be using the correct values. So let's check our deployment.tf, add the variables, container port and web port. Check the plan. Hasn't been updated because it didn't integrate that into the deployment yet, but let's go ahead and do that. Let's see, that's probably going to be in deployment.tf. All right, here's our env block. And I have a neat trick for this one. Terraform requires you to specify environment variables as name and value, which is not the format that we had them stored in our root level deployment. But if we do this thing, then we can use a dynamic variable to expand it into name value pairs, even though that's not how we stored it. So that will expand web port to web port with name and value of 80. So we can get rid of this. And I think we have a container port we need to fix here too. Yep. So we just do var.container port, Terraform plan. Perfect. Here is our same two changes that we have on all of these that we have to run. I still don't know why that is, but they look fine. They're not going to hurt anything. So we're going to head and Terraform apply. So now Terraform plan should be clean. And we'll look at the git diff real quick. So here we've added our avatars deployment with our two new variables, container port and envars, and then we've added support for them in our module so that we can specify them as needed in the config. And we didn't have to put in container port or envars for any of the other projects because we defaulted the values for them, which is a really handy technique. So let's look at deployment.tf. So now we have 3 full services deployed and managed by Terraform, and we have 27 lines to do it, which is really not bad. There's not much more you could scrape out of here and still have something valid. Maybe if you use name and namespace as the same value. But when you have more things in the same namespace, you're going to want to be able to change that name. So that's why I did it that way. So there's one more that I want to show, which is just a slightly more complicated one. But I think we have all of the variable support we're going to need. So let's go ahead and see what timeline looks like. Well, we're going to start with a git commit. And now we're going to add timelines. So going here. So this is the minimal thing that would let timeline work if it wasn't so very, very complicated. And let's go ahead and import that. We're going to import it just like we did the last two, probably. So we're just importing into the modules. And I'm still going to need to Terraform init before I can do those imports. So we're just importing timeline, import timeline, and we'll see what Terraform plan looks like. Okay, so wait for load balancer true. We can ignore that one. Yeah. So we are missing a bunch of environment variables in order to make this work. So all we have to do is we just have to go in there and edit the environment variables to be these values, and then we should be good. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to steal these real quick because I don't have a handy dandy paste ready. And I'll just put these in here real quick. So database. And looks like I'm going to need to change web port to 80 on this one as well. So let's get that done. And then get rid of these notes. Okay, so now if we Terraform plan, now we just have the same two. And we're just going to apply those. Wait for rollout, wait for load balancer. No idea why it's different than everything else. Anyway, you get the point. If you make some modules and edit them to add variables, you can easily make Terraform deployments that are pretty cool. Always when I'm trying to demo stuff. Yeah. So, but the thing here, so 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 services out of the 14 deployed in this file. In my actual Terraform setup, I actually have everything all done. This is why I was easily able to, redact my environment variables so that they're set up on the system right now, so that they're, I can actually do a demo and it's not going to cause security holes. If you can get on my local network, then you can get onto my registry.sector4 GG. But yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. But this will work for basically anything. If you can target it in the import statement using the provider, then you can get all the information that you need to be able to write your Terraform configurations from scratch by scanning existing infrastructure, which is super powerful. And you can modify that to be able to do everything that you need by specifying the minimum amount of information that you need. So this deployment file has 41 lines in it, and it contains the complete information for 4 different services that have somewhat different configurations. So I find that very impressive. I hope you do too. Thank you.